Hello, Troy. It's
Hi,
so
Janet.
nice to see you online.
Nice to
I'd
see
like
you.
to introduce you to the people who are joining us today to listen in and watch our series. Um, Troy is someone that I've met several years ago. He's been working with a friend and colleague, a shamanic practitioner named Heidi McBratney, since 2011. And since that time, he's developed his own healing practice, powerful healing practice. He's an elementary school teacher, and he's right now finishing up his PhD, where he plans to merge scientific philosophies, modern scientific philosophies, with indigenous wisdom ways. And I'm so excited, Troy, to have your voice be a part of our discussion, our living conversation about what it is to make peace in the world today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the welcome. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be a part of this, and just grateful that we have a chance to share in peace in the virtual world.
Me too. It's been quite a surprising, delightful journey of finding out how many people are excited about having a voice and contributing their voice. So I am just feeling so honored and ignited and activated and delighted to hear what you have to say today.
Yeah, great. Yeah, well, I wanted to send out light and love and peace to all the listeners, so that they may walk in their ways. I like to see people walking in their ways, learning, knowing who they are. So I'd like to just send out that love, that light, that peace to all who are listening, and all in the future who may be listening, all the sentient beings that we are a part of now and in the future, and send out some healing messages to the past as well. I wanted to start off with that.
Thank you for that. That's a beautiful piece to bring in. The reason we're having this conversation and taking the time out from all of the things that take our attention is to keep this conversation alive and to have it bless every life that's touched by it. So I'm really glad you did that.
Yes.
So we can start in so many different places. You're weaving together so many interesting paths, but maybe we'll start with what peacemaking means to you today, and what kind of comes to mind when you think about that.
What comes to mind? It's certainly peace of mind when you say that, right? Peace of mind. I say peace of heart. Peace of mind, body, and soul. That alignment of the mind, body, and soul. And what comes to mind as well is a story. I'm going to be paraphrasing it. You may have heard of it. The story of the wolf and the grandfather talking to the grandson. It's an indigenous story. Father talking to his grandfather, talking to the grandson about two warring wolves that are inside him. And then the grandson asked, which wolf will win? And the grandfather says, the one that I feed. Peacemaking is about feeding the peaceful wolf, the peaceful side of the self. So how I do that is with, and how we can all do that is with our meditation, with our prayers, with our intention, with the food that we eat. So there's many different ways to do it. But it is that feeling of like, if I can rest and be in silence with myself, I'm saying good things in my mind. I'm saying, Troy, why are you doing so well? I'm asking myself positive questions. And then when I see someone, I can send out a positive vibration to them, a positive thought to them, a positive intention to them. And just, it's a growth too. I think sometimes we start off in life with difficult circumstances. Many of us do start off in life with difficult circumstances. And the piece is, not that we're perfect. None of us are perfect. We're going to make mistakes through life because we're human beings, and that's the nature of the beast. But did I grow? Did I grow from where I started off and the circumstances that were given to me to where I end up? Did I improve it a little bit? Did I make myself and the world a little bit better in some way, a bit more peaceful? And I think if I could do that, I could say, hey, I did a little bit of peacemaking.
Troy, we're having a little bit of difficulty with sound. So I'm just going to resume. So sorry about that interruption there. A little bit of technical difficulties coming in, but got it covered now. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're talking about peace starting with the self, really, right? And that what we pay attention to and give our intentions to grow. And
that's it. Wonderful. Yeah. So I mean, that's a key there. And mindfulness has a big part to do with this too. If I'm paying attention to my thoughts in the moment, and a thought comes up, do I feed it? Do I continue to feed it? Or do I say, okay, how do I let it go? I can continue to ask myself how I can let it go. I can do some deep breathing. I can focus on something that I'm grateful for. There's many different ways. And I think the key is growth. It's not how perfect I am at doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Do I grow from the time I started the day to the time I end the day, from the time I started my being to the time my being is expired on the planet? Did I make some improvements? And if I can do that, I can say, hey, I created some piece. I added to the piece of the planet, of the world. So I can be proud of that or happy.
I 100% agree with that.
Yeah. I
have a teacher who says, it's not the size of our platform or it's the size of our vision that counts, and being willing to show up every day and reach higher for that vision. So it sounds like that's what you're doing.
Try our best, sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm intrigued about how you're weaving the world of science, and I think you said math when we were talking earlier, with indigenous ways. They sound so separate.
Yeah, it's an idea that came to me in a vision, as well as some of my students, the ones who we diagnose in the medical model as having autism. They seem to communicated some of these ideas to me. But I can explain it briefly by looking at the number one and the spirit of oneness. So the number one, I'm arguing, has two sides of it. There's two sides of the same coin of the number one. The traditional one that we would like to teach about is the ABC 1, 2, 3, and then I say this is one finger, and we all agree, right? There's no arguments with that. The other side of the coin, which I call the spirit of oneness, is that which holds together the cells and molecules and atoms and protons and neutrons and Higgs bosons and on and on and on and on. There's many levels of order there to be held together in one particular thing, right? So that glue, that togetherness, that love, I call the spirit of oneness, and that holds anything together. And now the idea is the number one can be anything at all. So there are a couple of concepts. So for an example, it would be, this is one peace sign or one pair, one triplet, one quartet, one hand, all the way to infinity, which is one number. Right? I can also have one person, one place, one thing, one idea. And so with those two concepts, the first concept is called unitizing, when I put two as one. And the other concept is called abstracting, where I say one person, one chair, one head, right? So when I put them together, anything at all can be one. So I can say the Tao, a chair, and democracy are one mystery. So a ball, a computer, and tissue is one fraction of the universe. So in that sense, the number one can be, we can abstract it to anything at all. As well, the spirit of oneness, through the concepts of mystery, metaphor, and relativity, that can also be whatever we want it to be. I mean,
Right. It sounds like you're weaving webs of connection in the oneness piece, which is very much related to peace on earth.
That's
very related.
How it relates to peace is that I'm saying that if we don't argue about the number one, everyone wants their children to go to school and learn the ABCs 1, 2, 3. That's the first thing we learn. This is one, right? We don't argue about the number one. why in the world would we have wars about the spirit of oneness? That's so I'd say, how do we make the spirit of oneness as benign, as loving, as neutral, you could say, as the number one, so that we can all see ourselves as one and generate peace from that idea.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
One of the things that I have come across about the number one is that it represents new beginnings and gifts, and that also seems very tied to this idea of oneness, to have fresh starts and to be sharing gifts in a way that brings oneness instead of separateness. I like that.
Absolutely. And it talks too about the paradox, because there is a need for the separateness of the number one. Of course, you are a separate person from me. So, I mean, if I did this to myself, that's okay, right? And so it's to acknowledge that there is a separation and there's use for it. So that there's the paradox. So you are separate from me, and there's benefits to us seeing the separation. And there's benefits as well to us seeing our togetherness as one pair of healers, one pair of peacemakers. And I think we tend to focus a lot on the separateness when we get into groups, or we get into group identities for different purposes. And these identities tend to look at themselves as being against each other. And so the question I'm asking is, how can we make a one identity that is so all-encompassing and neutral at the same time, that we can all be a part of it and see ourselves as a part of it for the purposes of creating peace on our planet?
Right. And in your role as a teacher, how do your ideas, you said some of them came from your students or were inspired by your students.
I sorry, you were gonna, how did they?
Well, I'm just loving the idea of someone committed to making peaceful connections to oneness working in schools. It feels like the children are our future, and that it's such an important place to bring this kind of thinking.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of ways. There are a number of ways, and I'm currently working on different ways in which it can be introduced. I'll think about one academic way that I thought of introducing it, and then the other, which might be more in regards to how the students can think about it in different ways and make themselves peaceful. One is an example of when we teach in school. We teach the kids when they're in kindergarten that these little centicubes, I don't have them, but they're little squares that the kids count with when they're in kindergarten, and they're represented as the number one. And then when they get to grade 4, grade 5, they have to start learning about fractions and decimals. And as we represent them, it's difficult to have a fraction represented with the little number cube. So when they're in kindergarten, little number cube is 1, and then when you put them together, they represent 10. So I'm saying, if we actually tell the students, and this is part of the curriculum, if we tell the students the number 1 can be anything at all, it's represented in any way. When they get to grade 4 and they start learning about fractions, then the long 10, this can now represent the number 1, and then the short one can represent 1/10 of it. So they have the idea that, that the number 1 can be anything at all. Then numbers can be represented relative to each other in different ways, fractions and so on. And math, I think, becomes more intuitive for them, because they can use manipulatives a little bit more successfully. So that's one way in an academic sense. The other, if we're thinking about conflicts and conflict resolutions and things like that, if we have an opportunity to kind of think outside the box of I am a this and you are a that, we can probably ask the questions: how are we one, right? How are we? That may be a question that might come up. How do we agree? How are we? We're both males or whatever. We're both students in the school. It might, that question, knowing that they are one, that anything can be one and they can be one together, they might be looking at how they are, how they agree as opposed to how they disagree. And of course, the other things that we talked about, like the mindfulness and all these other aspects of peacemaking technologies that come from different cultures can now be infused in what it means to be educated, and and students will have access to them. So I do things like mindfulness with the students.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so that helps them to calm themselves down and to learn and to be in a better state for learning.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I have a friend who's a kindergarten teacher, and she's got, they call it roots of empathy training, where they bring in mothers and babies, I think. And the purpose, though, is to help people get in touch with their empathy for others at different ages and different. That sounds. So this kind of makes me think a little bit about how labeling, especially in schools, you mentioned the word autism.
Yeah. People
with special needs. I think the spirit originally of labeling was to help bring extra attention and needs where they felt needed. Mm-hmm. And sometimes labeling has the opposite effect of then separating or creating separation. Do you notice that in your classrooms, or do you have a feeling about that?
Yes, I do. I see two sides to it. I see that there can be a benefit of labeling. I saw that there was a positive intention for it, to say that the student needs more support, so that if we're able to identify the students who need more support, then we can put more resources towards that student so that they can get their needs met in the learning system.
Right.
And sometimes when we do that, of course, the other side to it, the disadvantage is that us being humans, we kind of think, okay, well, this student is more difficult, so therefore I'm a teacher. I'm really, I'm used to teaching math at a high level, so I don't want to, associate myself with this, or this is more difficult for me. I'm not just teaching a subject. I have to sort of do other things that are not related to what I was trained to do, or there's lots of different complications that come in. Of course, sometimes like how we even value people, right? And so if someone is labeled as gifted, for example, that means they're a really quick learner and we want to be associated with them. It has this sort of supremacy that we all have in ourselves as human beings, to be associated with somebody who's better or more successful. And then of course, if a person is a slower learner and they're not as successful, we don't want to associate with them because they're lower on the popularity scale, so to speak. So I'm thinking about, from my experience, as being labeled as bipolar in the medical world, right? The way we might look at that in the Western medical model, unfortunately, I'm not only looking at medicine, but generally in our modern world, it's like, crazy psycho bum. Like there's a lot of stigma attached to mental illness, right? So as opposed to the indigenous way, where you're looked at as shaman, healer, sage, and you're looked up to, and like some of the elders get excited that this is a person. What message are they bringing through? How can we mentor them? This is an exciting message that's coming from the spirit world. And I think it could be the same thing with students with autism, that they're looked at from the many indigenous perspectives as being able to communicate with and have a relationship with spirit world. And how can we, what is the curiosity there? How can we get curious about what their gifts are and be able to do them? So I think bringing in those perspectives from other cultures is very helpful for us to learn about the student more holistically, as opposed to just how well they can read at a certain level or do math at a certain level.
Right.
Yeah.
There is a quote that I'm fascinated with that feels like it touches on to what you're talking about, and I'm going to have to look up the author, but we all have heard it takes a village to raise a child. But this quote says it takes a child to raise a village. And it really makes me think about how, certainly in my life, my children have been my biggest teachers. And I'm also really interested in this idea that some of us come in to be the way showers, to wake up our villages to what needs to be changing in us. In the conversation we're having, it would be healing disconnection and otherness, bringing people back to a state of oneness. And we started talking a little bit about initiation, which feels like is part of this conversation too. Is that bringing up anything that you might want to share?
Yeah, well, the first thought is, with many of the children who are coming in at this time, we talked about 2012 and this time that we're in, this time period that we're in currently, being a different kind of time. Many of the Indigenous elders are recognizing this time after 2012 be a different kind of time, and the children who are being born in this time, some of them are coming in prepared with and prepared for the new light that is coming in at this time. So they are way showers, many of them, and showing us how we can be more peaceful, and how and they're expressing their gifts. They might be really upset with the way that that the world is, the separation in the world that's happening right now. So they may be, some of them may be quite vocal in that, in saying, how do we change this? How do we move towards a more peaceful, a more enjoyable, a more equitable, a more just world? So I see that happening. In regards to initiation, some of them, the being born is sort of an initiation, and I think it would be for some of them, maybe coming from one world to another.
Yep.
I mean, in my own personal experience, the initiation, one of my initiations was in my what the medical world calls psychosis, whereby my consciousness was in another world, and that has helped me to be able to do the healing work that I do, because in the opening that I get to be able to communicate with the spirit world, they help me in healing processes. They help me to get my thesis. They help me in daily life. They give me dreams and things like that. And it is, as you probably know, it's very, very, very difficult work sometimes in initiation. Sometimes, unfortunately, we don't survive. Sometimes people don't live through initiation because they're so difficult. And so yeah, but I mean, the initiation that comes from the universe as one thing that we sometimes don't survive, and then there's sometimes initiation that might happen within a tribe or something that's a little bit more choreographed by elders. But they're all sort of necessary as an awakening process for us to be able to see through a different set of eyes, so to speak. See with a different part of our psyche, a different part of our mind, a different part of our soul. So I think when we go through that initiation process, we're able to still see what we've originally seen, and then see something more than we were seeing before. So we hold on to the old seeing and the old view, and then we incorporate the new view with it, and that's how new knowledge and evolution of the human spirit, in a sense, can kind of happen through universal initiation, and as well as some choreographed ones by elders.
Yeah, well, it makes me think, like, the initiation in the world, we don't always have elders there to help us out, do we? Our culture in particular just has not risen to that need. And so it often, we can feel quite alone and isolated. It's also making me think of something our mutual friend Mandaza said to me. Mandaza Kandemwa, who is called a peacemaker, and has certainly committed his life to bringing peace. But he says, if you're a peacemaker, don't expect to be surrounded by peace. You're going to be called to the very places that are not peaceful. And I think, when we're initiated, or when we're woken up, is another way of thinking about it. We're waking up to a new way of being. It's not usually very comfortable, is it? Not in my experience, anyway.
Yeah.
My wake-up calls have all been like a hit on the back of the head, or worse.
Yeah.
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 And
They're.
this is, go ahead.
No, please ask a question.
Well, I'm just thinking, we were chatting a bit earlier about the wounded healer,
Yeah.
and it feels like initiation, or the, you know, the result of it, it brings us full circle back to being more able to access the wisdom inside and the healing to be channels for whatever healing we're able to
Absolutely.
bring.
Yeah. Sometimes I make the analogy of, a computer and the software, right? So we might have, with the new light that's coming in, the new software that's coming in right now, if we have a Commodore 64 and we're trying to download Windows 27, right? Sometimes there's some crashes that happen, right?
Mm.
So yeah, and it's very difficult, and I agree with Mandaza that, and Heidi said the same thing to me too, that if we kind of see ourselves as peacemakers, we are probably going to be in the center of things that are not peaceful, like sort of being the eye of the storm sometimes. And there's a lot of resistance that happens with this as a result. Like many people, I'm thinking about Joseph Campbell's monomyth, where, there's the call, and it always happens where there's a call and the person who's getting the call is refusing it. And I think I'm a little bit still in the refusal stage. I'm still in like denial. Is it over yet, or can I be normal now? Right? That's a continual question where you want
Yeah.
to call, because it feels so difficult. It's unbelievable how difficult the initiation process is, and I think that does open up, as I said, that's a channel, the different set of eyes. It's a growth the growing pains are just so difficult, but it's, I think, necessary to go through that, because after having that capacity, then we become a little bit more able to deal with more difficult things in our psyches and our difficult things with our bodies. We can push ourselves a little bit more. So having that greater that initiation gives us that greater capacity to be able to deal with difficult things, even though sometimes it's not something that we call. Like I pray for ease and grace when I because it's
Me too.
yeah.
Ease and grace, but let me transform into all I can be, but do it easily and gracefully.
Yeah, that's
Painlessly, please.
oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
But
'cause,
we have to go into the belly of the whale, Joseph Campbell's
yeah,
belly of the whale, for a little
yeah,
while,
yeah,
and
yeah.
make our peace there.
Yeah, I remember at the time I didn't know what this was, and later on, going and looking back at it and recognizing that this place that I had been in was called the abyss, where
Mm.
I just felt as though, it's hard to explain. It felt like every moment was getting worse, and it was a never-ending
Mm.
a place that you kept getting worse moment by moment by moment, and it seemed like it kept on lasting forever and ever and ever, getting worse by worse by worse by worse.
Mm.
And it was the most painful psychic experience I've ever had. I sometimes even have difficulty talking about it. I don't believe that, whatever our selves would put us through that. And at the time going through it, of course, you'd feel like, how you'd kind of have the thoughts of, hey, I want to end this. I want to end my life so that this can end. And then only later on, like years later, I recognized that this type of initiation could work to deepen my psyche. It's like
Mm-hmm.
something that's like a musical instrument being carved from wood. The wood, it was a tree one time, and the tree had to be carved, and there's a lot of pain from that, but then it's able to create beautiful music afterwards. So sometimes when we're going through it, it's not the most pleasant, but afterwards we can kind of say, well, it's a good thing that this happened to build a certain capacity in me, so that I can help this person. I can do this. I can help other people in different ways who are walking the road, which is very fulfilling. That's for me to be able to extend my lived experience to other people who might be going through something similar.
Well, I just want to acknowledge that, and just be with that. And I'm sorry that you had to go through that. That's I'm sorry, and I'm so glad that you came through,
Thank you.
and that you have everything you have to offer now as a result. I'm honored to witness yourself that you are today, your blossoming and your sharing of your gifts. It's really beautiful.
Thank you.
Now, one thing we didn't say when we introduced you that is that you also did some stand-up comedy for a while.
Yeah.
Now, that feels like such a gift in the middle of all of the other things. Do you still get to do any of that? Does it?
Yeah, I do a little bit with my fiance Christy, who tells me to be quiet. She's heard enough of my jokes.
Oh my! I bet you have some funny times together.
Yeah, we certainly do. How the comedy came to me is I was falling asleep one night, and some ideas started coming to me, and seemed to come with a certain level of intensity and energy that were just animating my body.
Right.
And then I had the inkling I had to share this. I had to share it on stage. And as soon as I shared it, then that energy just kind of dissipated, and I felt like I could be calm once more.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think how it might be related to peacemaking in a way is that sometimes, as we know, some things going on in the world that are ridiculous, that are, and I think it's sometimes important to, of course, be in the vision that's pulling us forward into the oneness, into the peace, and into the light, into the love. And sometimes it's valuable to point out the things that are causing us to be in separation and be in difficulties, right? So
right.
I just sometimes look at comedy in a couple ways. One is it might do that. It might point out things that are ridiculous that need to be changed, and allow us to ridicule them. And the other thing is that laughter is a really powerful medicine. Right?
Yes, it is.
So
oh my goodness. Thank goodness we have laughter.
Oh yeah. So it needs some comic relief for some of these difficult times that we are in currently. And so I think that's some of the reasons or thought processes might come. But I mean, it's all connects to, I think many of the people who go through, as you are too, a creative person, sometimes the creativity comes through for me. It comes through, it might come through comedy, it might come through spoken word poetry. Sometimes it might come through music. Sometimes it might come through something I'm writing in my PhD thesis. So it's I just try to be that channel, try to be listening and trying to be humble,
right.
So to hear what is coming through me, and then try to then present it and share it with others, in hopes that it resonates with them and heals them in certain ways, and helps to move them to who they need to be, and inspires them to become the channels of themselves, and listen to their light, and to self-actualize in ways that are meaningful for them.
Right.
Yeah.
It feels like humor is one of those beautiful gifts to have in your toolbox that helps us deal with the paradox of being present for another being's agony, really, sometimes, and being able to witness it and bless it and hold it sacredly and still lightheartedly, because that also feels like a big piece of being able to walk with inner peace, being able to keep our balance, keep our center. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, absolutely. It's that paradox that you mentioned. What it makes me think of is so I think sometimes the big cosmic joke is that actually, who said this? It was Voltaire that said this, that God is a comedian playing to an audience who's afraid to laugh, right? So, it's the cosmic joke is kind of within ourselves, within us, but a paradox where we're trying to go through life and hustle, just got to get this, and then we get to the end of it, or the afterlife, and we realize, I should have been spending more time with my family. I should have been hugging someone more. I should have been telling somebody that I love them more, or whatever the case was, doing something more meaningful for my life. And if we're able to, I think if we're able to laugh at it, it tends to, the irony or the paradox there might come in. There's more of an irony. It might come in where I think much of the comedy may come from places that are dark and heavy and painful. So at the time something might happen to someone and it's painful or it's difficult. And then later on, they're able to laugh at themselves and learn from it and recognize it was a lesson, and then put some humor around it. And I think that's quite a gift to be able, and some do it really, really well, the ones with names that we know, who are able to take something that is negative and heavy energy, and to be able to transform it in a way that is medicine in a sense that we can laugh at it.
Yeah, I agree. So we're coming towards the end of our time together today, which is just the beginning of the next chapter. But is there anything you kind of want to leave people with? Anything you'd really like just to use our last bit of time together with?
We had chatted about some spoken word poetry that I did, and a couple are on my mind. One is called, maybe I'll share the one that's called The Peaceful Planet. And it came to me as a voice of the Creator and a voice of Mother Earth, and they're talking, they're flirting with each other, talking about
as they are wont to do.
So there are two voices. So I'll try to change some voices. One says, he starts off, Pachamama, you look fine, I was thinking. I want to serenade and know what you drinking. She says, I like to love your lyrics, you mysterious one. You do remind me of La Phantom. You know I'm drinking rain as long as you buying, and I'ma dance, because I know that you spying. Dance, you say? You read my soul and my mind. I love to feel your groove. We can dance any kind. So can I get a piece? You can get a piece. I can get a piece? Yeah, you can get a piece. A peaceful planet. Are we there yet? A peaceful planet? Are we there yet? To you, Big Daddy, I give gratitude. You so welcome, honey, and I love your attitude. Because you and I together, we always create. And I'm so happy that peace is our fate. I heard a rumor. To you, I need to pray. Just remember, honey, that you also need to play. Speaking of play, I hear you's a player. Have some faith, girl, and come to my lair. And turn, mama, turn, mama, turn. 'Tis the season to learn, mama, learn, mama, learn. The rhythm book, let it burn, let it burn, let it burn. Just wait until it's our turn. It's our turn. It's our turn. So can I get a piece? You can get a piece. I can get a piece. Yeah, you can get a piece. A peaceful planet. Are we there yet? A peaceful planet. Are we there yet? A peaceful planet. Are we there yet? A peaceful planet.
Oh my goodness, I love that.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness, that is so awesome. Yeah. This is going to go viral. A peaceful planet. Yay.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I love it. I love your sense of humor. I love your spoken word. That is such an art, and what a gift. I feel so lucky to have heard that.
Thank you.
Really awesome. Thank you, Troy.
Thank you, Janet.
Thank you.
I'm glad. I'm so glad for this.
Me too. I'm just going to close for a minute here and see you on the other side. All right.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.